Welcome back to the in.pencil podcast. I'm Adam,
And I'm Jess.
and it's been a pretty crazy couple weeks since our last episode. Has it not?
It has. It is. I mean, we don't really have much that we can say to describe it, except for it's 2020, and 2020 is when everything seems to be happening. Though today's topic didn't start in 2020.
All right, we should not beat around the bush. We should just get straight into it. We're going to talk about police brutality and Black Lives Matter and the government as a whole, systematic institutional racism and classism that dates back to the founding of the country, and that we are still experiencing today.
Yes.
And we still see evidence of that in every institution that exists, to include the financial institution, real estate, marketing, culture, and unfortunately, government. So I don't really know how we should start this. I guess we could say...
So the first thing we need to start saying, we're both white. So this is coming from two white people. So if you're like, don't want to hear more white people talk, just turn off this podcast. We understand. Now, I do want to start by saying, like, what can you do now at this time? Because I think it's important to get that said first. There are a lot of places you can go and a lot of work you can do, and you should, look it up, find that information for yourself. If there's one thing you can do, it's actually educate yourself.
Yeah.
Here's one place. I'm just going to give you one website that I've seen a lot of people use, and it has a lot of information, and that is Black Lives Matters. That's BLACKLIVESMATTERS. So Black Lives Matters .carrd.co. So yes, Black Lives Matters .carrd.co, and that's matters with an S. Said about 5 times. We'll probably also post a link to that. And
we'll link it. What does that website hold?
So this website holds places where you can sign petitions. Hold on. Yes, you can text or call for different places, like different governments, especially with the most recent things with, let me check, about, the murder of George Floyd is what I'm seeing on here, and Breonna Taylor. Mm-hmm. Julius Jones is on here. He's on death row. He's not someone who has died yet. And there's some more information. I won't go through the whole list. You can also donate. It has places for more resources that you can get, where you can learn about resources and educating yourself. It has places for protesting, like what you need to do before you protest. Yeah. And we won't get into a lot of the details on exactly what to do on that. Though I will say, don't forget, we're in the middle of a pandemic. So if you go out to protest, make sure to be as careful as possible, because the last thing we need to do is continue spreading a disease that is much deadlier than a flu, people.
Well, it is. I mean, I'm not surprised that the protests are contributing to the spread of coronavirus. So yeah, no shock in that. Yeah, but that's not to say the protests are unwarranted. Systemic racism has been an issue in this country since the beginning of time, effectively. But the version that we're seeing now is more subversive and more underlying than it has been in the past. It's not as overt, and it's mainly been given a foothold through certain laws that allow people to discriminate without detection. After the civil rights movement, the housing market was basically placed in favor by governments to favor not rich, but just white people, establishing suburban neighborhoods, and then through a process of allowing loans, filtering out applicants for housing, and then effectively shoving people of color, Black, Latino, into ghettos effectively. And then later on instituting a drug war that disproportionately sought out, prosecuted those same people for the most minor drug offenses and incarcerated them for a much longer period of time, which led to the largest prison population in the world, made up predominantly of people of color, for the purpose of reinstitutionalizing slave labor.
Yeah, we're basically skimming over history very much, and we can't go into a lot of details, and we won't go into a lot of details. I think it's impossible to do this in one podcast, and truthfully, this is kind of our thing that we got to remember is like, this isn't the end. We can't just talk about it now and then forget about it a month from now like we have been for the past ever.
Yeah.
This stuff's been going on since
forever.
I'm trying to think, like, we think about, like, they're talking about riots and protests. Those happen now. Those happened in 2017, 2016. Those happened in the civil rights movement. Those happened in the late 1800s. Those happened in the middle 1800s. Those happened in the 1700s. This has been going on forever. This is not new.
Yeah.
So when you're saying, and a lot of people are saying, like, I want to go back when America was better, or back
America
before
great again.
Yeah, and it's like, this is the way it's always been. You just weren't listening back then. You didn't have to listen, and now we have to listen, and we have to be uncomfortable. One of the most interesting things I saw was on Facebook. A Facebook friend of mine, who I know from high school, who is also white, said, after the protest happened in our hometown and there was some rioting, and she was like, I'm scared for my kid's life. And my first thought was, so you're now experiencing one aspect that Black Americans have been experiencing every day of their life. And it's just like, and you don't get it.
Right.
It's that place of privilege. And I'm starting to learn myself, like, all the things that all the privilege I have. And it's hard to even go through, like, things that I don't have to worry about and things that I have benefit from. Because if you're white, you probably benefited from systemic racism.
Yeah.
Granted, racism is systemic, so that's probably redundant to say. And I say probably because I don't know. Maybe you're not from the U.S. and maybe you just moved here last week.
I mean, other countries have issues with racism as well.
And there's some really terrible racism across the world in different ways. And we're not here to define racism. We're not here to just talk about the differences of racisms that you find, because it's not just what you see in America, or the U.S., I should say specifically the U.S. When we say America, America is really, two continents, if you want to get honest.
Yeah. I mean, what's that word that you said before about naming the names of places or whatever?
Demonym?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Americans are a demonym of people who live in the U.S., but America is not the name of our country.
Right.
Our country technically doesn't have a name. Our country has a description.
But regardless.
Yeah, that was a tangent that probably should get cut out.
No, it's fine. So I guess really, like I said, effectively we are saying the obvious when we say that racism is an issue. People who are out protesting and rioting have reason to do so. It's not just an issue that is just made up. It's not an imagined problem. It's a real life issue that people have been dealing with for as long as before this country's even existed. But I mean, in modern times, since the end of slavery. I guess we don't really need to state the obvious, but what we need to do is call out everything that we see wrong with how this situation is being handled, starting with the protests and the riots. So I guess we could start with saying people who are protesting are justified in doing so. And if they're out peacefully protesting, then there should be no reason why they should face any confrontation from any version of law enforcement, whether it's National Guard, police, or any other agency. But that's not the reality. The reality is that even peaceful protests are being boxed in and shut down.
And real quick, I will say, we're not saying that, we're not going to go and say like rioters are bad people and you shouldn't riot.
No, riots are justifiable. Riots are people who no longer feel like they have a voice. It's their last cry for attention.
Yeah. Let's face it, like rioting, what did the U.S. do when it got taxed in 1775? They started a giant riot that became their revolution, basically.
The Boston Tea Party, yeah.
Yeah. It was all a big, and you can look at it that way. Why is that a justifiable riot versus this, where it's about making change and you've done everything you can up to there. You've not had your abilities, and so you have to go. You have to keep going until you are heard.
Yeah.
So, but we are. So, I did want to say that real quick, so that you don't say that we're saying we're only talking about the good, peaceful protesters. But what we are talking about is when you are protesting peacefully, theoretically, everybody's on board that that's okay.
Yeah, theoretically.
Yeah, theoretically. I say that, and it's very weird because we're only a few weeks removed from another protest that happened by people who said that was okay, and now are saying these peaceful protests are not okay.
Right, and that is the great hypocrisy with how these events have unfolded since the start of COVID. It's just so frustrating. You protest the government in one instance, and then whenever the people that you don't like protest the government, then now you're in favor of the government. So which is it? If you're a gun-toting, conservative, freedom-loving, anti-establishment Republican, then and you're against the protests by people who are tired of being abused by the system, the same system that you're against, right? Supposedly, where's the issue here? The issue is that they're black. That's the issue, just to call it out. Furthermore, if you are somebody who is in the military, in the police force, or any other quote unquote law enforcement agency, and you're tasked to go out and control, I use quotations, control peaceful protests, and you do so with violence, especially unprovoked violence, resign. And if you are tasked to go and do that, then you have a right to conscientiously object to that order and disobey an unlawful order. And if you don't disobey an unlawful order, then you're a coward and you don't deserve to wear the uniform or the badge to begin with. Just as much as anyone who goes out and violently beats somebody in the street or chokes somebody to death without any provocation or uses an unjust amount of force to subdue somebody, just as much as they're a coward for doing that act, you're a coward for provoking violence when there would be no violence, or there would be a very minimal amount of violence otherwise. People in uniform need to remember their oath and uphold their integrity. And if that means being punished for disobeying an unlawful order, then so be it. Because it may be unfair for society as a whole to ask you to do that, but those are the cards that you're dealt. Deal with it and do the right thing.
Yeah.
The right thing is not shooting people in the neck with rubber bullets who've done nothing, who've done no harm to anybody. The right thing is not knocking down old people in the fucking street and then watching them bleed on the concrete. The right thing is not choking somebody to death. So I guess that's kind of where it's really the majority of what I wanted to get out. Government uses force when it has no moral leg to stand on. And in this situation, for as long as this has been going on, government has been on the wrong side of history since the early 1900s. Government has consistently been slow to respond to injustices, or they've completely went the other way with it and implemented laws to unfairly attack minority groups, not just racial minorities, but other minorities as well. So if you're on the side of government in this debate, which it shouldn't even be in a debate, but if you're on the side of government in this debate, then you're on the wrong side of history. If you can watch a speech by the President of the United States and shake your head in agreement with anything that he says, then you're on the wrong side of history.
Yeah, it's weird. Yesterday was literally the I forgot what year anniversary, 76th, I think. I'm trying to do quick math. 76th anniversary of D-Day.
Yeah.
Right. So you can tell what day we're recording. And it's just kind of like, and now anti-fascism is a bad thing. And they literally were anti-fascist. And here's the thing. None of them can stand up and fight anymore because they're all either, those who are still alive are very old. Like the youngest you could be is like, hold on, I'm trying to do the math. If you
80 or 90 something.
Yeah, let's see. Say you got into it, you only fought in 1945. And say you were 14 and snuck your way in. That's about the youngest you could be probably and sneak your way in. I know some 16-year-olds did it. That would mean you were born in 1931.
Yeah.
That would make you almost 90.
Yeah.
And now how quickly we've changed to being like okay with that.
Yeah,
okay
we don't even pay attention. That's the thing. That's the thing that bugs me about people. We don't even pay attention to the moral and philosophical principles that politicians live by and make their decisions off of. We vote based on our own self-interest, and we pretend, we lie to ourselves and say that the only justifiable political action is voting. And the problem with this country, and this is what we say to ourselves, the problem with this country and the problem with the way that things are in the world, with society, global society, is that people aren't engaged enough in the political debate. That's what we tell ourselves. So then when something happens and triggers people to be engaged in a political debate, like, I don't know, a murder of a black guy who had absolutely no resistance whatsoever, no capability to resist 4 fucking cops. So when we witness that and that triggers political action, then people who don't understand that, or people who have a vested interest in, I'll just go ahead and say it, people who are cops who are somehow have a vested interest in maintaining the police state for their own benefit. I don't even know how to really get to it. Conservatives. You can excuse that. You can poke holes in a narrative. You can dismiss it all you want. You can say that person, wasn't a good person, whatever the case may be. But you can't do that for the thousands of other people who've been in very similar circumstances who didn't get the media attention because it wasn't on video since 60s, 70s, 80s. This is a systemic problem. I guess part of the problem with the LA riots, or with the Rodney King situation, when I've read studies, is that police departments will take white cops who are not familiar with black culture at all and inject them first of all, they'll inject them with fear, and then they'll put them into black neighborhoods to police and expect nothing bad to happen. Like, if you're going to have people policing neighborhoods, they should be participating in the neighborhood, not there as a adversary to the people who live in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? And cops are always seen as the adversary in every black neighborhood because of the history of this kind of violence. So there's no real way to fix it other than by changing the entire training process, the entire mentality that police officers go into neighborhoods with. And that starts from the very, very bottom. That starts from like basic police academy training. I don't know if you have anything to add to that or anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's just simple. One of the things is just like sorry, just so hard to say. Apparently, just to like get these words out because it's just weird. It's just strange. Like diversity classes and training is something that a lot of places make you go through, and there's a reason for it. It's not just to check off a box that you have it. It's because we come from different cultures and backgrounds, and we need to be able to interact with people and realize, hey, just because people are different from us doesn't make them bad. But we don't come from that mentality naturally for some reason. And I can't get into the psychology of racism and the biology of racism, but
I think it has some root in fear, right? Yeah. Fear of the unknown, or I don't know. I guess there's a tangent you can go off of about injecting white cops in black neighborhoods that probably has some bearing on other situations like Ferguson or various situations in New York or anywhere. But the reality is the system is fucked.
There needs to be a change. That's just the biggest thing.
Yeah. So yeah, one of the issues with modern policing is that police officers are trained to be soldiers as opposed to being trained to be peace officers. The military has a system in place through the Defense Logistics Agency called 1033, I think, where they take expired military equipment and they just hand it over to small town, mid-sized town, sheriff's department, police departments, anywhere. You'll see police departments that have MRAPs, 2 MRAPs in town of maybe 100,000.
Define what an MRAP is.
An MRAP's an armored personnel carrier. It's meant to withstand armor-piercing bullets and to take rollovers. It's meant to be used in Afghanistan, is what it's meant for. It's effectively a rolling tank because there's a porthole at the top for somebody to come out with a machine gun, either a 240 or a 50 cal, most likely a 240. So it's a war machine. And these things are just handed over to police departments. For what purpose? They say riot control. How often in these small towns, just as an example, I don't know if I should say, how often does the situation really dictate the necessity to have these machines? Police officers are given IOTVs, which is improved outer tactical vest, I think. All sorts of equipment from the military. So you're training police officers to be soldiers. And when they're trained to be soldiers and think like soldiers, who is their adversary? Who are they being trained to fight against? Well, the people in the communities that they're supposed to be policing. That's who they're supposed to be fighting against. So they're given a confrontational mindset from the very beginning. So of course, when they go out, they're going to use excessive force. Of course, when they go out, they're going to want to go play with their new toys, right? You give them toys, they're going to want to play with them. Period. You give any kid toys, he wants to play with his toys, right? It's the same mentality. So that program,
sometimes literally calling them toys.
Yeah. So that program needs to be defunded and decommissioned. That's like action 1. Well, then we have the governmental doctrine of qualified immunity.
Yes, and this is something you may have heard of. Be honest, I just heard of it last week for the first time. And not from Adam, believe it or not. So like after I'd heard about it, I saw Adam post something about it, and then we were talking the other day about this, and he brought it up. So if you do not know what qualified immunity is, then you're about to find out.
I'll tell you. Qualified immunity, directly from Wikipedia, just to make it easy to look for. Qualified immunity is a legal doctrine in U.S. federal law that shields government officials from being sued for discretionary actions performed within their official capacity, unless their actions violated clearly established, quote unquote, clearly established federal law or constitutional rights. It is intended to protect officials who, quote, make reasonable but mistaken judgments about legal questions, end quote, extending to all, quote, officials, but the plainly incompetent or those who knowingly violate the law, end quote. Qualified immunity applies only to government officials and does not protect the government itself from suits arising from officials' actions. So effectively what this concept does, what this legal doctrine does, is, among other things, protects law enforcement officers for being held accountable whenever they mistakenly severely injure or kill somebody, such as the case with the cases we've discussed so far, Ferguson, Floyd, numerous other.
There's just so many
police brutality cases that, there's so many, you can't even really list them all. And that's the thing. When I'll get back to qualified immunity in a second, but when you defend the system and say most cops are good, but there are a few bad apples. Well, there's more than a few bad apples. And the good apples out there are normally done away with for going against the status quo. There was a cop who recorded a YouTube video and went out and said basically, like, hey, you can't violate people's rights in this way. And he was like, if you continue to oppress people for too long, they're going to rise up and fight back. And it's basically like a warning. So then his department was like, yeah, we agree with you. So go ahead and post a video or whatever. We agree with this. But then when it got viral, he was told to take it down by his chief of police. And he was like, nah, dog, I'm not taking it down. It's staying up. And so he got fired. So he got let go. There's an example of like a good cop who's acknowledging the fact that people have rights and acknowledging the fact that you can't oppress people for too long. And when his opinion is too loud, he gets shut down. Whereas other cops who have killed people unjustly, shot them in the back, choked them out on the street, they are protected by the system. A lot of times not being charged, a lot of times being allowed to return back to work or given administrative duties for a period of time. So qualified immunity, there's a bill in Congress at the moment created by Justin Amash, who is the only libertarian in Congress from Michigan.
The only libertarian in Congress, who and also is from Michigan.
Yes, exactly. So the bill is basically in the doctrine of qualified immunity. So it would be like the first step in holding police accountable whenever they accidentally murder somebody, or I don't know, Rodney King beat the shit out of somebody in the street, which since this whole thing has started, I've seen countless videos of riots, not riots, but of peaceful protests, I don't know, peaceful, whatever. I don't really, not there, but of protesters who are not resisting and are still being beat down by cops.
Yeah, a lot of rioting going on out there by people who are wearing badges.
Yeah, honestly, they're the violent offenders in all of this. I just can't understand how people can defend that sort of activity. And I can't understand how.
I think we can see it. Like, there are good cops out there. Yes, we're not denying that.
Yeah, but they're not. They're not vocal. They're not going to speak out. B, they are far and away overshadowed by just the endless amount of atrocities that keep coming out of the police force.
Yeah, well, you can't say. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, you keep saying like keep hearing like a few bad apples are just ruining it. Well, there are a few people, quote unquote, maybe just a few, but they're doing some pretty terrible things, and they're not being held accountable by people who can hold them accountable. This is not like some rogue people that you're like, well, we can't hold them accountable. We have no jurisdiction over them. You literally do.
Yep.
you're their boss. You can fire them.
Yeah.
Or make sure they don't get a gun. There are things that can be done. And you're like, oh, but there's unions and stuff like this.
The unions got to go. The unions have got to go. All they're doing is protecting corrupt cops and shitty cops. That's all they do. I mean, I guess they're good for job security, wages, whatever. But that's the thing. Okay, I get it. If you're a conservative, if you're a cop, all this negative attention is affecting your work life and could be affecting your paycheck because people are saying to defund the police, which, I mean, in some ways, yeah, especially when it comes to all of the financial benefits that police departments get for contributing to the drug war. So yeah, I can understand wanting to protect your lifestyle and your livelihood and all that other stuff, but it's the wrong answer. The right answer is the entire system needs to be revamped from the ground up. The training, the laws need to be rewritten. So the system needs to be revamped from the ground up, starting with repealing, but not ending with repealing qualified immunity. The good cops out there need to speak up and hold their colleagues accountable. Yeah, there's a lot of crime in inner cities, St. Louis, Chicago, Memphis, Los Angeles. There's a lot of crime. But most of it, if you trace it back, stems from the war on drugs. So the next thing that needs to happen after you repeal qualified immunity is you need to just straight up end the war on drugs. And if somebody's in prison at the moment for a nonviolent drug offense, whether they're white, black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, they need to be let out immediately, no matter what the drug offense is. So yeah, no matter what schedule of drug it is, no matter what it is, if there's not a victim, there is not a crime. Period. End of story. So they need to be let out. And people who are in there for, I don't know, people who've been in there for drug offenses for an extended amount of time should be reimbursed or compensated monetarily, financially, for having been locked in prison for so long for something that should not even be a crime to begin with. Or, I mean, you can get into what to do after that, but the first step should be ending the war on drugs, because it disproportionately favors throwing into prison and utilizing for slave labor minorities, groups of minorities. So that should be like step 1 or 2 after this bill to remove qualified immunity. I don't see any other way to move forward with what we have now, other than just forget about it and go back to the status quo. You know,
which we've done very well over the past
numerous times. Michael Brown, numerous times we've just said, okay, we've gotten our anger out. You know, we're okay. The cop in Michael Brown situation, I think, got convicted. So it's like, okay, justice has been served for like one instance. So you get lazy. And if we get lazy and we just allow things to return to the status quo, even after these cops are convicted, which I'm sure they will be, because if they're not, they're going to have even bigger right on their fucking hands. But after all is said and done, if the laws aren't changed, if the system isn't reformed, if things aren't drastically improved to make policing more of a service than a violent, confrontational, endless problem for people, then there should never be a stop to protests if the system isn't fixed. But I think people need to realize that the problem isn't just corrupt cops or bad cops. The problem is the system. So you have to like acknowledge that first and realize that first before you can even move into fixing individual police officers. You have to fix the system first.
Yeah. I mean, even if we defund the police, that doesn't stop the problem. That just stops one aspect of the problem.
Yeah.
And that's the aspect we're talking about today, is mostly in the police part. But again, as Adam brought up at the very beginning, there's so many other aspects where the problem still exists.
Yeah.
It's just, it may not look as violent. It's just,
it's equally as unfair.
Yeah. And it's can be very deadly, some of the things, because let's face it, being poor, if you're poor, you're going to die sooner than if you're not poor.
Yeah. Simply because of access to healthcare or,
good foods. Food deserts happen in poor neighborhoods.
Yeah.
In a lot of major cities. That's we don't make it possible for minorities to live, for people of color to live in richer neighborhoods without it being dangerous.
Yeah.
For them.
Yeah.
And the white people who live in these neighborhoods, like, oh, now it's going to be dangerous for us. And it's like, no, you're not the ones in danger.
Right.
It's the people of color who are moving in. And I know specifically we're talking about Black people here, but that's more of an overarching, all people of color do have this problem.
Yeah.
In some regards, in some systems. And not going to even get into all that part of the aspect of different racisms for different people of color.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, racism isn't an American thing. It's a people thing.
Yeah.
So until we can learn as humans to truly equal ourselves out through the educational system, through the economic systems, through the way that we employ people, everything, the way that we, even the way that you position fire departments and fire stations, the more suburban the neighborhood, the better fire protection there is. Yeah. Right. The more closely packed in and small and Section 8 housing doesn't, if there's a fire that breaks out there, they might as well just consider the whole building gone. So everyone's home is gone. So every single aspect of society has to be unhinged and redone if you really want to fix the problem.
And so, this podcast, this particular episode is mostly for white people to listen to, because we can't, that's who we're talking to right now, because we don't need to be telling other people what to think necessarily,
No.
But we are saying, like, if you are white and you feel uncomfortable now, that's good. We need to feel uncomfortable.
I feel uncomfortable. We feel uncomfortable recording this thing. You can tell in the way that we're talking that because it would be very easy for us to just be like, we're hypocrites. It's very easy for somebody to, even if you even call us hypocrites for even talking about this topic, but there needs to be a lot more people of every personal background to speak up for everything. Whenever there's an injustice, whenever things are not as they should be, everyone who has the ability to speak up should speak up. I think that's the reason why I wanted to record this today, was because enough is enough, and we now have a platform to where we have a small voice and have the ability to say something. So
yes,
kind of responsible for it. Kind of have the obligation to say something.
Yeah, we can no longer be silent. And this is our fight. This is everyone's fight. This is a fight for humanity. Because if we're saying one part of humans, of the whole human species, is less than another part, then that's not humanity.
Yeah.
If we're all humans, then we're all humans.
Yeah.
And we are all humans. That's like literally true.
I think if you want to live in a society that gives people an equal opportunity to be self-sufficient, this is coming from my libertarian perspective. My ideal world would be where every interaction is voluntary. Every single individual is self-sufficient and has the ability to survive on their own. But trade and commerce is done through an equal one-for-one swap of goods or currency. If all of that were to ever occur, it would have to be in a society that values humanity equally, no matter what race, gender, color, nationality, any of those things. The starting point is fixing the injustices in the laws and in the system, and then change people's minds. You have to, I mean, if you have kids, you have to groom your kids to not be hateful dickheads, because I promise you, in conservative towns throughout the country, there are generations of kids that are growing up at the moment and they're being taught that what you're seeing on TV is just black people being anti-authoritarian thugs, and that's what you're seeing on TV, and that's simply not the case. They're fighting an injustice, but the grooming has to line up with it has to have the integrity of the truth. And unfortunately, in towns in Missouri and Tennessee and Oklahoma and Texas and everywhere else, where a lot of kids are probably disconnected from reality and they live in a bubble, what they're probably being groomed. Another generation is probably being groomed to hate anything that is unlike them, or anyone that is unlike them. We got to do better. This whole fucking thing.
Wrapping up time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do have a few things I want to say for wrapping up.
Go ahead.
I guess this will be cut. Is there anything you need to say too?
We just gotta do better, man. We just gotta. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. You're part of the human race, and you should be treated equally, not just by, your neighbors and your friends and your schoolmates and everyone else, but by society and by government. And the reason you have disproportionately poor neighborhoods and people who just live in perpetual poverty is a direct result of systematic and racist policies, not just with law enforcement, but with every other aspect of life. And until those systems are changed, that's just going to be how things are going to continue.
Yeah, we did not even get into depth that much into the problems, and that's just in one podcast you can't do that. I mean, if we recorded a new episode, like a 3-hour episode every day for 10 years, we would still just be skimming the surface probably, and that's how deep embedded it is into us. And so this is just one aspect, one little small aspect of the pie. And this is the thing now. It's on all of us now to learn, educate ourselves. The same way you don't go out driving without knowing how to drive. The same way you don't start being a surgeon without learning how to be a surgeon. You have to educate yourself on that. We need to educate ourselves on this, because this is really, really important. I don't know if those analogies were even useful, but the point is, like, we need to educate ourselves. And even though the only thing, voting isn't the only thing, it might be important. Check out and see what people are saying. The elections are coming up this year. See what people are saying. See who's running, and let your voice be heard. And because votes talk to those in power. They're not the only ones.
Yeah.
But if we start putting enough people in there, maybe there can be some change on that front. But that's not the only front. You can't just vote and say, I've done my part. I've voted for the liberal, therefore I've done my part, and now I can wash my hands for the next 4 years. That's not how that works. Because it doesn't. It means that's just one aspect of it.
But everyone needs to vote. Like, stop sitting at home. Like the last election, 2016, there was, I don't even remember what the numbers were, but there was like a disproportionate amount of people compared to the people who actually voted to the people who didn't vote. It was like, I think 2/3 of Americans didn't even vote. something like that. I don't know. Obviously, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was something enormous like that.
Yeah.
Because who'd you have? You had Hillary and you had fucking Trump. And now who do you have? You have Biden and you have Trump. So your options aren't great, unfortunately.
Yeah, here's the thing. I was about to say something that I realized isn't true, but this year, it's true this year. If everybody who didn't vote in 2016 this year decided to vote for me, or everybody who's not, I'd be president with a 538 electoral college landslide, like 538 to 0. You couldn't do it in 2016 for one very constitutional reason. I'll let y'all guess which one that was. But yeah, I'd win a landslide. Anybody, any random person who is, U.S. citizen by birth, lived in the U.S. 14 years.
Qualifies according to the Constitution. Yeah.
35 years or older, blah, blah, blah. And also runs. Not like, no, cut that out.
No, we know what you mean. Runs like tries, not runs like athletic run. Anyway, we're beating it on the ground.
Yeah, so voting is one aspect of it, and it's important. But also donate to places that are fighting legally and systemically, who are either working with politicians or working in the courts or working on the field, in the streets, home to home. That's another thing you could do. Protest. There's so many different ways you can protest this. You don't have to get out in public to protest this.
Yeah, you can record a podcast.
Yeah. And for those of you who it's not safe to get out because, again, we're still in a pandemic, find other ways that you can do your part, and we can all do our part. And this isn't the only thing we have to fight for, but this is a thing that we need to fight for. There's so many other issues. We get that, but this is human rights. This is very important. I think my last points, I've got 2 last points, and then I'll let Lincoln, if you have any last points. And they are, human rights are not political. So when people keep saying, I don't want to hear about politics, this is about human rights. Yeah. This is not about politics. It involves politics, but this isn't politics. And it's so annoying to see that. Human rights are not political. And also, human rights aren't a matter of opinion. This isn't like, oh, you believe this thing and I believe this thing. No, it's human rights. They're not a matter of opinion.
Yeah.
This is that you can be wrong and say Black people don't deserve to have the same rights that white people have. That's not an opinion. You're just wrong.
Right.
And I think we need to start calling that out. Like, this isn't political. This isn't a matter of opinion. This is human rights.
I'll link to a video in the description that I think everyone should watch. And it's a lawyer reacting to the events of Donald Trump clearing out protesters so he can go down and stand by the St. John's Church with the Bible upside down. There's never been, as far as I know, a more overt disrespect of both the Constitution and the Bible that I can ever think of in American history that tops that moment in time. And every single cop, security guard, every law enforcement person that made that happen should resign, just like I said before. To give him a pass to allow that thing to happen, that is the very definition of violating the Constitution. And he has to go, man. He has to go. You guys, it's time's up. Like, he's not the guy. He's not the guy. If you think he's the guy, then you're wrong. I'm sorry. He's not it. I thought that about other people in the past, Bush, Obama, Clinton, but this is a whole new level of ridiculous. And it starts from the top. So if that's the culture of violence that he is fostering for himself, then that's a culture of violence that's going to exist for every other entity of law enforcement and government that we experience. It's only going to get worse from here if that's what we're if that's the hand that we're dealt for the next 4 years. So with that,
thank you for listening to the In-Pencil podcast. We hope you found this particular time educational and thoughtful.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't feel like it's good to do our regular outro because it just doesn't feel right.
Nope.
I guess our outro should just be, Black Lives Matter.